Our update today is that the program is going away. And if this legislation passes, which is very likely to do, they anticipate that program will end by the end of January 2024.
Whoa, that's like in 12 days.
Yep.
Oh, God, the disappointment is just exhausting. Urgent ERC update. Oh my gosh, Trev, there's some crazy stuff going on that you have.
Today's January 19th, 2024. There is pending legislation, bipartisan legislation in Congress right now, which is very likely to be passed. It's part of massive tax revisions to be implemented, passed and implemented before January 29th, 2024, so that this stuff can get into this year's, the 2023 tax filings.
Oh, even though it's 2024. Okay.
Yes, because in 2024 you file your tax filings for 2023.
No, I know that. I just wanted to make sure that sometimes it's sort of like when you write the date on checks in the new year, you put the previous year, although I don't have checks anymore, so that shows you how old I am. Should we cut that and edit it?
You can do whatever you want. As part of this tax legislation that they're debating, and again, very likely to pass, is the elimination in its totality of the Employee Retention Tax Credit Program. Why? Well, because they apparently, when Congress created this as part of the CARES Act back in 2020, they anticipated $85 billion in government expenditures in refundable tax credits to small businesses that had retained employees. But it turns out the government has already spent over $230 billion. So $85 billion to $230 billion.
But hold on, there's more. It says that they're blaming fraud and abusers of the funds.
To quote the New York Times article from this afternoon, the employee retention credit was initially projected to cost the federal government $85 billion. And here it is. But widespread abuse has bloated that tab, and as of late last year, the government had paid out about $230 billion in refunds. Go ahead, ask me. You know what you want to ask me.
How much of it really is fraud?
Right. We see this all the time. We're EIDL experts, so we've done all this conversations and YouTube videos and dialogue about the alleged fraud of COVID EIDL loans and COVID PPP loans that the SBA's Office of Inspector General and certain senators and congresspeople are saying that fraud. I don't think that's
nominal.
What it is.
It's
Here's
nominal.
my opinion. Mm-hmm. My opinion is that, yes, the government anticipated $85 billion, but when did they do that anticipation, that number? Where did they come up with that estimate? The early days of COVID. How could they have known?
Yeah.
So to say today, at the end of 23 into early 24, to say today that $230 billion plus in refunds is based on abuse and fraud, I think is an overstatement, because I think it's an invalid statement.
I think there is a bigger problem here. If it potentially was underestimated drastically, egregiously underestimated, that could lead to a bigger problem. How much of a handle does our government even have on the small business is the backbone of the economy?
That's a whole other conversation.
Then how are they underestimating this? And also, depending on the size of the big companies and the conglomerates, how did they miss the mark on this?
Well, I actually have another news article from today that I can share with you. Is it Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank? He's a venture capitalist. Well, he testified this week in front of Congress, in front of some of the subcommittees on finance and small business. And he is saying to the Congress and to the Senate, with regards to the President Biden's programs, the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act, this new legislation, he said, listen, you have written this legislation, but it's really geared to giant corporations who don't need it. The small businesses need it. And he is saying to them, please, I'm asking you to pay more attention to small business. So I don't know if that answers your question when we're talking about employee retention credit.
It answers my question, but it just makes me even more angry, because I can't stand when they're, and 2024 is an election year. How many times do we have to hear in our lifetime that small business is the backbone of the economy? But as an example of what we've pontificated about, The SBA, the Small Business Administration, is the most underfunded agency, ill-equipped to handle the magnitude of their responsibility that they've been
Literally
granted
the government
by
agency
the government.
responsible for supporting small businesses,
It's
and
so
yet the Congress has
exhausting.
not reauthorized this agency over 2 decades. It's got one of the smallest budgets of any federal agency, and it's struggling. It's underfunded, overworked, overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it's the same here with the employee retention credit, with this statement that widespread fraud. I personally, it's my opinion, I do not believe that $230 billion in employee retention credits is due to fraud.
No.
Are there abuses? Are there mistakes?
Yes.
Here's what we have seen with small business owners that we have spoken to. Often they've gone through their payroll providing companies, and every time we've spoken to a small business owner who went through their payroll company to process the employee retention credit, there was a problem.
Oh, wait, there's more between the payroll protection and this led us on a path to have to feel responsible to educate people that 1099s are not employees.
Yeah.
That happened during the PPP.
Yeah.
They thought their contractors were employees.
In other words, there's so much more nuance here, Congress, IRS, before you start casting aspersions about people abusing a program. How about a little more respect for small business owners and understanding where they come from and what their thinking is, such as many small business owners don't understand the difference between a W-2 employee and a 1099. And so if you're trying to get an employee retention credit for people who are contractors as 1099s, not allowed. Action.
I guess we're going to add the
Okay,
bloopers.
cut. Action.
Urgent employee.
Oh, wait. What? Action.
I probably shouldn't look so happy. Okay.